of Energy. You're now 5 months into that role, and you're already delivering results. Congratulations on that. This committee has since then favorably reported 10 additional nominees, including James Danley, who was already serving as your deputy, and 9 more who still await confirmation by the full Senate. I encourage Senate leadership to move forward with those well-qualified nominees who, again, have received our favorable recommendation out of this committee, to move them forward promptly so that they can get in place and then help you implement President Trump's America First agenda. The department's budget in recent years has ballooned. We've seen a dramatic expansion, fueled by the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, which instead provided tens of billions of dollars to fund green energy projects that make energy less reliable and more expensive for the American people. Perhaps the worst example of this, the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office. The IRA gave it over $300 billion in new lending authority, far exceeding the traditional portfolio, and the previous administration rushed to approve nearly $100 billion of those loans in just a few months, more than twice what it had previously dispersed over the last 15 years. So I want to commend you, Mr. Secretary, for taking strong action to protect taxpayers' dollars, including by canceling nearly $4 billion in funding for worthless IRA projects that were rushed out the door hastily under dark of night between Election Day and President Trump's inauguration. Under your leadership as Secretary of Energy, DOE is back to approving LNG exports consistent with DOE precedent, with nearly 10 billion cubic feet per day's worth of export applications now green-lighted after the previous administration's unlawful pause. Your department's also addressing in meaningful ways growing grid reliability issues, crises caused by issuing numerous 202C orders to keep baseload generation online during the most stressed months, helping to avoid blackouts and keeping energy prices stable for Americans all across the country. All of this tends to set the stage for a return to the Department of Energy's proper role, that is, focusing on basic research and development in energy and science that foster innovations, strengthen energy independence, and reduce energy costs for the American people, all while assuring greater reliability. I look forward to hearing from you today, and in particular, hearing how you plan to continue strengthening oversight, discipline, and accountability within your department, and how you'll manage programs like the Loan Programs Office, the science labs, and new transmission initiatives in a way that will protect taxpayers, strengthen our energy independence, and serve the best interests of the American people. So again, welcome, Mr. Secretary, and I'd now like to recognize Senator Heinrich, the ranking member, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, and welcome, Secretary Wright. Secretary Wright, we are here to discuss the FY26 budget request, and while this is our first opportunity to ask you questions, since your confirmation, it's not your first time defending this budget. Last week, you testified before the Energy and Commerce Committee, and earlier in May, you appeared before the House and Senate Energy and Waters Development Subcommittees. It's clear from those hearings that there seems to be a noticeable disconnect between what you've stated publicly and the actions taken under your leadership as Secretary of the Department of Energy. At your nomination hearing in January, I asked you if the executive branch has the authority, without Congress's approval, to withhold or terminate funding for an activity Congress approved in law. You said that you would, quote, to follow the laws and statutes of the United States of America. On May 30th, $3.7 billion in awards from the Office of Clean Energy demonstrations were canceled without notice or without justification. Cancellation of these awards crosses into impoundment territory and is certainly a breach of contract. Actions like these will severely damage our country's ability to lead in developing and commercializing next-generation technologies while ceding ground to our competitors. Another way to undermine our leadership demoralizing the scientists and staff at DOE, the largest federal sponsor of basic research in the physical sciences. I know you realize this because on February 5th, you called DOE staff, quote, the unbelievable humans that are in the room today, that are across our national labs, in our cleanup facilities, in our offices around the country. Less than a month later, however, 2,000 DOE employees, including hundreds of National Nuclear Security Administration employees responsible for safeguarding the nation's nuclear stockpile, were fired. That was unacceptable. But only after heavy criticism did the department partially rescind the NNSA termination order and scramble to reinstate these employees. In the coming months, the department is reportedly set to lose thousands of additional employees to early buyouts. As my colleague, Ranking Member Murray noted, taxpayers have spent $70 million to pay people not to work at this point. But it seems that you may be regretting that decision. The Washington Post reported that across the government, officials are rehiring federal workers who were forced out or encouraged to resign. You know that this is no way to run a business or an agency, and I believe that we have to do better. And just yesterday, I heard from the national labs that this budget would cut funding for the labs by $2.75 billion, or 11%, compared to fiscal year 2024, an estimated loss of more than 7,700 jobs once fully implemented. Our nation's scientific and energy leadership is on the line. And let's talk a little bit about energy dominance. In your confirmation hearings, you said that you would be an unabashed steward for all sources of affordable, reliable, and secure American energy and the infrastructure needed to develop, deliver, and secure them. However, last week before the Energy and Commerce Committee, you said, I have never been for all of the above. And if I said it at one point in time, I misspoke. I'm against energy sources that make the energy system more expensive or less reliable. I wouldn't call that misspeaking. That's a disconnect. If you truly were against energy sources that make the energy system more expensive or less reliable, I don't believe that you'd be propping up the uneconomic J.H. Campbell coal power plant in Michigan to produce expensive and inefficient power. A new report by Energy Innovation shows that average megawatt of power generated by U.S. coal plants is 28% more expensive in 2024 compared to 2021. And that means that families spent $6.2 billion more on electricity generated by coal in 2024 than they would have just 3 years ago. As electricity demand continues to grow, we will not be able to meet the energy needs of new data centers while keeping household bills low if we prevent the growth of affordable clean energy resources. We need a true all-of-the-above strategy to adequately deliver our energy goals, and this budget fails to deliver on that. During your time as Secretary, you've also said that 10% of Americans in the last 12 months have got a utility disconnection notice, and that one of your goals was to shrink that number to 0 by making energy more abundant and affordable. That is a worthy mission. And yet this budget eliminates the Weatherization Assistance Program, which saves households an average of $372 a year. You've often said that artificial intelligence is the Manhattan Project of our time, and yet this budget proposes a 14% cut to the Office of Science and a 57% cut to ARPA-E, where our major AI R&D efforts are currently underway. We cannot expect to maintain U.S. leadership in emerging technologies if we shortchange the office's programs and, most importantly, people needed to do so. Lastly, I want to raise DOE's failure to respond in a timely and substantive manner to congressional oversight requests. I have sent 4 letters on topics ranging from staff reductions to funding freezes and project cancellations. I have received 0 responses. That is unacceptable. You and I may disagree on many things, but the need to ensure that Americans have access to affordable, domestic sources of energy and support our research and energy leadership should be shared goals. This budget proposal does not support those goals adequately, nor do many of the current actions at the department, and I hope we see changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. Secretary Wright, you're now invited to give your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Lee, Ranking Member Heinrich, and members of the committee, it is an honor to appear before you today as Secretary of Energy to discuss the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Department of Energy. Under President Trump's leadership, our priorities for the department are clear: to achieve American energy dominance, bolster our national security, meet our Cold War legacy cleanup commitments, and unleash historic innovation, including AI, for our nation and world. We are driven by a bedrock conviction that an affordable, reliable, secure energy supply is the foundation of a strong and prosperous nation. When America leads in energy, we lead in prosperity, security, and human flourishing. We are committed to advancing our critical missions while cutting red tape, increasing efficiency, and ensuring we are better stewards of taxpayer dollars. The President's fiscal year 26 budget will ensure taxpayer resources are allocated appropriately and cost-effectively. We will invest DOE's resources in technologies and sources that support affordable, reliable, and secure energy, and provide a return on investment for the American taxpayers. DOE has several tools at its disposal that can advance these emerging energy technologies, and I thank the committee for their leadership in establishing a new energy dominance financing program for DOE's Loan Program Office as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. This will enable DOE to return to its core mission of supporting projects that are most critical to America's energy security while maintaining responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars, something DOE failed to do in the previous administration. It is deeply concerning how many billions of dollars were rushed out the door without proper due diligence in the final days of the Biden administration. DOE is undertaking a thorough review of financial assistance that identifies waste of taxpayer dollars, protects America's national security, and advances President Trump's commitment to unleash American energy dominance. As a result, we recently announced the termination of 24 projects totaling over $3.7 billion in taxpayer-funded financial assistance. These projects failed to meet the economic, national security, or energy security standards necessary to sustain DOE's investment, and the taxpayer should not be forced to subsidize them. Instead, we are advancing a policy of energy addition, fully leveraging affordable, reliable, and secure resources that have powered our country for generations. The United States is blessed with an abundance of coal, oil, and natural gas, and our administration is committed to using them to meet growing energy needs of the American people. Every one of these resources was unleashed through our world-changing power of American innovation. Our national labs are the engine that drives research and development to expand our energy dominance. We will prioritize research that supports true technological breakthroughs and maintains America's global competitiveness. America must play a leading role in the commercialization of reliable, safe, and secure nuclear energy, and we are taking steps to accelerate innovation in this sector. DOE is working to advance the rapid deployment of next-generation nuclear technology, including small modular reactors. I'm proud to report that we've officially ended the previous administration's reckless pause on LNG export permits and have returned to regular order for reviewing and approving new permits. DOE will also work to replenish the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a national asset that protects our security in times of crisis. And I want to thank this committee for prioritizing funding to refill the SPR in the One Big Beautiful Bill. We are advancing President Trump's pledge to lower the cost of living and expand choice by right-sizing DOE's approach to home efficiency standards and regulations. Under the President's direction, we've begun slashing more than 47 regulations as part of the largest deregulatory effort in history. These actions are projected to save the American people approximately $11 billion while restoring consumer freedom and lowering costs. The responsible stewardship and modernization of the nation's nuclear weapons systems is paramount for this administration. DOE is focused on addressing critical upgrades for the U.S. nuclear stockpile and maintaining our engine powerhouses for submarines and aircraft carriers. Both tasks will become even more crucial in the next few years. Our nuclear innovation as a nation began with the Manhattan Project, and the next Manhattan Project is clearly AI. DOE has a significant role to play in driving AI innovation for scientific discovery and national security. Our agency has world-class high-performance computing capabilities, including 4 of the world's top 10 computers. Harnessing our energy potential to power global AI leadership while meeting growing demand will be the challenge of our time. But America doesn't back down from big challenges or big builds. As Secretary of Energy, I'm honored by the responsibility to help meet the American people's growing energy needs and lead the world in energy development. I appreciated the opportunity to work with many of you on this committee to unlock America's full energy potential and drive down costs for families with the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I look forward to continuing to work together to achieve President Trump's energy dominance agenda. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today.
Thank you, Secretary Wright. We'll now invite members of the committee to ask you questions in 5-minute rounds. I'll begin, and then we'll have Senator Heinrich after me, and then we'll alternate between Republicans and Democrats. Thereafter, in order of seniority, subject to the early bird rule adopted by the committee. So I'll begin now. Secretary Wright, the Energy Information Agency, or EIA, defines something known as the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity, as, quote, the estimated revenue required to build and operate a generator over a specified cost recovery period. Now, as I understand it, this LCOE calculation does not take into account existing generation resources. That's already in place, spinning out electrons, especially dispatchable generation, which is retiring at an alarmingly rapid pace. Additionally, wind and solar have been shown in many instances to have a negative effect on the levelized cost of dispatchable generation. This is because generation, like gas, nuclear, coal, among others, are forced to reduce output while still having fixed operational costs that go along with those enterprises, all to accommodate for electrons put onto the grid by other sources, intermittent renewable generation sources. I recently introduced a bill that would repeal all the IRA subsidies for inferior generation, like wind and solar. Can you elaborate on how tax incentives for those generating sources, the intermittent sources, actually increase the levelized cost of firm resources, thereby increasing costs for consumers at the end of the day?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for the question. It's an issue I'm quite passionate about. I worked on solar energy in graduate school many years ago. And so, as I said in my opening statement and have maintained ever since, I'm for all sources of affordable, reliable energy. I'm not for all sources of energy, period, only ones that contribute to affordable, reliable, secure energy. The levelized cost of ownership idea is decades old, and it came out to compare always-on dispatchable sources, the cost of it, which we build a new nuclear plant, a new coal plant, or a new gas plant, because they provide the same thing. They provide electricity on demand. I compare, it was never intended, of course, for a source that you don't know when it's going to be there and when it's going to be gone. That's just a completely different entity. When your child is born premature and you place that child in a life-saving incubator, it's not okay to say it's going to turn on when the wind starts blowing. Or, well, it's on right now, but when the sun goes down, it's probably going to be off till the morning. There simply are no customers for electricity that you may have it, you may not have it. I gave it, imagine if you had a competitor for Uber that came out, no go, and they came out and said, our levelized cost per mile of transport, going to be 10% cheaper than Uber. Everybody should run to that. It's cheaper. Now, we don't know when we're going to come pick you up. And when we do pick you up, we don't know we're going to drop you off. But our cost, 10% cheaper. They're just two entirely different things. And so, yeah, as you rightly pointed out, what matters is the system cost. But if you have sources that, I can talk more about the Texas electricity grid later, at peak demand is the actual time that you usually get the lowest delivery from renewables. So you have to have the other grid, the reliable grid, to provide electricity at peak demand to keep everyone alive and the incubator on. And then we have a whole second grid that comes and goes with the weather. And of course, to manage both of those together, it's guaranteed, and data has shown it in spades, to be more expensive and a less reliable grid. And further, that no-go company that wouldn't fly, if we subsidized it and helped them buy these vehicles and stand up a business that with a business model that doesn't work, you just cascade a problem. They're very unique subsidies where we spend $1 of subsidy and it doesn't defray consumer costs. The government spends $1 of subsidy and consumers pay $1 extra for their electricity.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. Very good explanation. There is a residential solar company called Sunnova that received $3 billion, a $3 billion loan guarantee from the previous administration's Department of Energy that recently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And now Biden's Loan Programs Office Director, Jigar Shah, was aware of accusations that Sunnova defrauded seniors selling solar to those that were, quote unquote, on their deathbeds. Despite this, Mr. Shah instructed DOE staff to prioritize Sunnova's loan application after attending a dinner hosted by a Sunnova board member. The board member's spouse was the former chair of the DNC. The DOE Inspector General determined that Shah's actions potentially violated the ethical standards for executive branch employees. How can the American people be confident that the Loan Programs Office inside the Department of Energy is acting in their best interests when actions like those taken by Jigar Shah have undermined the credibility of that same office?
Huge undermining of the credibility, Senator, huge undermining. And it's one of the reasons people are mad at me for being slow and process-oriented, but it's in response to things like that we have created this program review process where we have a team of cross-functional people to evaluate every project of any meaningful scale. If it's a few $1 million or more, there's 500 such projects. We're going to evaluate every one of them in a business-like, professional manner, not a political manner, not a self-interested manner, but a business-like manner. And so, yeah, clearly we need a very different culture at DOE, and we are working every day to build that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
Secretary, first off, will you commit to responding to the letters that I've sent your office?
Senator, the most efficient communication, of course, is to reach out and we can jump on the phone at any time. I know we've done that a few times. I'm happy to do that much more. My schedule is very tough, and I should respond and will respond to your letters.
I'm sorry, I should not have to spend time in these hearings on this. It's a simple communication that I want something formally in writing on. I'm not telling you how to respond to it. I'm just asking you to do what every Secretary of Energy has always done and respond to my letters. Democrats, Republicans alike.
You bet. You'll get a response.
I appreciate that. I want to go directly to the heart of some of what you described in your Uber analogy. And first off, do you know what the sort of average price per kilowatt hour that retail customers pay across the country is according to EIA?
Yeah, it's about 14 cents.
I think it's 17.1 right now. I bring that up because I pay substantially less than that. I am in a utility in central New Mexico. Most people formerly know it as P&M. And I pay about 12 and change cents per kilowatt hour. And yet their generation is largely clean, mostly renewable, with batteries. And they've been able to maintain that cost profile of just over 12 cents per kilowatt hour using renewables and batteries. And I think you are absolutely correct that we should be comparing apples to apples. But today, with a little bit of storage, they're able to manage the grid with low cost and reliability with renewables. So when you paint a picture like they just turn off in the middle of the night or when the wind doesn't blow, that's not my personal experience. That's not how we're managing the grid today. Now, I want to talk a little bit about soaring power demand, because that's something that you and I both agree on. You've said that soaring U.S. power demand is a train wreck waiting to happen, and that necessitates significant investments and regulatory reforms. Doubling down on unaffordable energy will not get us the energy that we need. NextEra's CEO has recently pointed out the cost per kilowatt to build a gas-fired facility has gone up from $785 back in 2022 to $2,400 today. And he also stated that retirement of every coal plant in America, if we stop that, would only get us an extra 40 gigawatts. Natural gas generation, because there's a 5 to 7 year backlog on turbines now, will likely total get us maybe 75 gigawatts by 2030. And so I don't want to get into a back and forth over different energy sources so much as just to understand, did DOE do a modeling process to determine the specific impacts of this proposed budget on both supply, energy supply, and costs?
Absolutely. We have a team, in fact, that develops a model of the grid that looks at the grid by regions. And one of the comments you mentioned in your opening statement was we did issue a 202C order to keep a coal plant in southwestern Michigan open because of small reserve margins in MISO, and that plant was being retired without new capacity on the MISO grid to back it up. We were criticized for that, and 2 days later there was a blackout.
Did the state of Michigan agree with that analysis? Did you consult with them?
Well, we speak to the grid operators, the utility operator of that company, and had plenty of back and forth dialogue on that. I think in general, people realize this was a good move for energy.
Let's go back to the modeling that was done on this budget. Can you share that modeling with us?
Sure.
Great. I mentioned in my opening remarks the president's budget would cut funding at our national labs by $2.75 billion. At Sandia Labs in my home state, I'm hearing from engineers on pretty much every time I go home right now that this will significantly affect the Center for Integrated and Nanotechnologies, national user facilities, research equipment, that it'll limit fusion research on reactor environments and advanced materials, and jeopardize environmental monitoring, potentially exposing DOE to fines under a consent agreement with the New Mexico Environment Department. Did DOE do analysis and ask the labs for their analysis on the impacts of this budget on their ability to do their mission work?
The budget has not been allocated down to individual labs and all that, but all of the allocation of funds and decisions of how it'll be impacted will be done on a lab-by-lab basis. But no, this budget, unfortunately, comes from the tough world we're in today, where we American taxpayers pay $1 a tax and the federal government spends $1.30. That's just an unsustainable problem we're on. I share a passion for the national labs like you do. My goal is to grow, not shrink, the output of top quality science at our labs. But do we need to be a little wiser and get the political science, not the real science, out of labs? Do we need to be a little bit more efficient in running labs? We do. But are we going to gut the technology and science and what we're doing in fusion and nanotechnology at the labs? Absolutely, we are not.
Chairman, I'm out of time for now, at least until the next round.
Senator Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member and all the folks that are on the committee. I want to just do just this. You know, we are so blessed to have this man. It's off the chart. And I apologize. I apologize for your service that you have absolutely dedicated to all of us in every way. And then you have to be grilled. You know, we want, and we always would stand up. I would always stand up for, Good answers, good answers. This man says over and over and over, I'm an energy guy. I'm an energy, I understand this absolutely as well as anybody in this room. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. Now, with all that being said, he has said over and over, what he is tasked with is affordable, reliable energy. That's what we've got to have in this country today. And if we don't have that, we're in real trouble. Now, I know, I'll promise you this. We can volley back and forth, but absolutely, with all in me, I would vouch for this man right here. That's all there is to it. He's just that good. If you can't see his passion, you're not looking. That's all there is to it. He's eat up with passion. He's stuck on all the time. And absolutely, he has knowledge off the chart. Chris, I appreciate you. I really do. And I'll fight a buzzsaw for you any day. That's all there is to it. I can tell you just this, that from an energy standpoint, if we don't get our act together a year from today, a year and a half from today, we're hitting the fan. That's all there is to it. We are absolutely on a plane, and we're flying right at the ground, and we're going to hit the ground if we don't do something. This man can lead us. He can lead us with knowledge and his passion. He can lead us out to where we don't hit the ground. Now, with all that being said, we all know we're going to have a decision to make. How's it going to feel to make the decision? You're going to make the decision either for homes or really and truly for industry and jobs and AI and on and on and on. You're not going to be able to do both unless you've got a real leader of the band, and that's why I vouch for this man with all in me. Now, I can go on and on and on, but there was a fella, his name was Jim Billings. He ran a small seed corn company. They asked Jim Billings a long time ago to write an absolute critique of what he did because he was being bought out by a bigger company. And basically what Jim Billings did is he wrote 13 pages of a single space, and I've told you this before. And then he laid his pencil down and sat back, and then he decided to write, and he wrote, see the right man's in the right job, and they're motivated. And he put his pencil down because that's what the president does. Our president recognizes the energy situation, and the last thing I would say is just this. Tell me a time in history. Tell me a time in history that we have progressed without abundant, cheap, and now clean energy. There's nothing about this man that wants to damage our environment, our lands, our waters. He wants to lead us. And I truly believe our president wants to do the same thing. Mr. Chairman, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. We had a chance to say hello earlier. I invited you again to the Tri-Cities. You said you think you're coming sometime soon, this summer or fall, so we look forward to seeing you there and being with you. The Hanford budget and the tri-party agreement, there have been cuts to the Hanford office, lost 94 people out of their 308 Department of Energy workforce. These are managers. There's various issues with the budget request. So how do you plan to meet the tri-party agreement with the budget and workforce depletions?
Yeah, a huge part of the effort at the department the first few months has been to right-size the department, which is to look at how do we do things today and what's a more efficient way to do that. The department headcount grew well over 20% over the last 4 years, and I would say no evidence that it was more productive at the end of those 4 years. So again, as a businessman, except for during COVID, I never laid anyone off in my entire career. So I don't take the personnel decisions lightly. In fact, I take them very heavily.
I think a big moment's coming at Hanford. So, you know, I wish I could go. Anyway, we'll see each other in the Tri-Cities and we'll go over it. But
yes,
For a long time, there were lots of schemes about how we were going to clean up Hanford. But guess what? Vitrification is on the move. So now there's so much more the federal government can do in meeting the budget to meet the tri-party agreement because we're actually on our way. So I guess, we'll talk about this in more detail, but that's what's at stake here. The normal funding is missing the opportunity to actually get this project that has cost us so much over such a long period of time where we really need it to be. So that's the key point, but we'll go over those details. Do you support baseload hydropower online?
Absolutely. Hydro has been a great resource for this country.
Okay, so you think, you consider that part of baseload power? We have Senator Murkowski and I have a bill basically giving tax credits at very low cost just to help keep the efficiency of the hydro system. As we look at all the challenges we face with new power demands, making that system as efficient as possible is really critical, and we consider that baseload power. So I'm just asking, maybe you can look at the Murkowski-Cantwell bill.
Yeah, I would view it as baseload power, and to the extent that we can repower and increase the yield from existing hydro assets.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
They're quite beneficial to our electricity grid.
Thank you. They're beneficial in a lot of ways, but definitely to the grid, so thank you for that. Do you support eliminating 45V? Maybe this was asked by my colleague while I was gone, but 45V hydrogen production tax credit was proposed to be eliminated. Do you support that, or where are you on this hydrogen tax credit?
The government record in picking winners and losers and subsidizing in energy is a very poor one. So my default position is the less government involvement on the scales of energy sources, the better. I realize in the real world that's not possible, so we got to get rid of you got to prioritize which ones are the most offensive. And I mentioned wind, solar, and batteries certainly as technologies that we've subsidized and they've led to more expensive electricity. I would put them maybe at the most offensive. Hydrogen, it's tough with the math to see how in the long term it becomes a meaningful commercial energy source.
Well, again, there's lots of chapters here we could again talk about,
Yep.
but I actually think getting rid of the tax credits that we have, some of the other ones broadly, are going to lead to an electricity increased cost. And so can I get you to tell me about the hydrogen hubs, whether you believe you support the hydrogen hubs and moving forward on this?
So we put together, as I'm sure you've heard, and we've published it on the website, this project review process. We have a cross-functional team that evaluates every project. We're going through 500 projects.
But is that data call a way to kill the projects, or no, you really believe in funding some?
Absolutely. No, we are funding plenty of projects right now, and we don't stop funding any project. We're funding all of the existing projects right now, and when we evaluate them, plenty of projects will pass. Plenty of projects will pass. Other projects will say, hey, can you modify it this way to make it much more beneficial? Some projects will be modified and some projects will be ended.
What application are you most excited about in a hydrogen hub area? What application? Fertilizer, jet fuel, something else? What are you most excited about?
Well, so the highest value use of hydrogen, right? So it's expensive to produce, but there are high value uses of hydrogen. Like we produce it today commercially because in refining, it's very high value. In fertilizers and materials and chemistry, the problem is what's the cost to produce the hydrogen, and are there uses of it that their value is above the cost?
Yeah.
I say energy is about two things. It's just about people and math.
Well, we think even going back to the 45V, my time's expired, but in looking at, green hydro, which we have in the Northwest, drives down the cost and provides sources for very hard to serve, hard to decarbonize big sectors of the economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your willingness to serve, the tenacity you served with, and you bring so much to the table, and we are very grateful for that, and you continue to do it every day to just impress us. I, too, want to invite you to my home state of Mississippi. It's pretty hot right now, but the humidity today here, I think, is matching it. But we have just positioned ourselves for greater artificial intelligence, infrastructure growth, and so many things, like many states that you talk to when the members here. But we've attracted several significant investments like the Amazon Web Services, the hyperscale data centers from many major companies that we're excited about. But of course, it's crucial for supporting fast-growing AI is reliable energy and affordable energy. The Mississippi Power Play Initiative was recently unveiled by our state leaders, and it is about increasing energy production, but ensuring that those things that follow the affordability of that, the reliability of that, and access for all of these companies that are choosing to come to our stake. But we are uniquely positioned to use underground salt caverns that for energy storage to enhance the grid reliability in high peak seasons. We're fortunate to have that. But moreover, the state established an artificial intelligence regulation task force to guide the state as so many new technologies come on board, as the AI demand proactively comes addressing all of these issues. The state has really stepped up in our state leadership for doing that with the stakeholders' collaboration and the workforce training that's going to take place for the programs to support all of these initiatives. So we're really excited about this in Mississippi. But you would see firsthand that we're working to shape America's path forward in energy independence and AI dominance, and aligning perfectly with our national security and our economic growth goals and the potentials that are there. So I believe your insights is going to greatly benefit this country, going to greatly benefit Mississippi on our efforts to strengthen this, and honored that you're at the helm. In your testimony, you mentioned reorganizing divisions within the Energy Department, including refocusing the Office of Fossil Energy on its original mission of supporting fossil energy production. Thank you. Will you discuss how the department plans to strengthen this mission and find innovative ways to help achieve the President's goal of energy independence through the reorganization of the Office of Fossil Energy?
Yes, thank you. So it's actually one of our smaller budgets, the Office of Fossil Energy. Even though it's over 80% of American energy, when I was born, it was sort of mid 80%. It's mid 80% today. So it's the dominant source of energy in the United States and the world. But it's been a commercial success for a long time. Doesn't need a lot of involvement from the department, except for permitting, getting out of the way, issuing LNG permits so you can build infrastructure. But we do have some money to invest in next generation technology. So there is some research funding in the fossil energy. The part that was removed was several $100 million that was focused on reducing greenhouse gases. I've written about climate change for 20 years, so it's a very real thing. But funding things that take a ton of carbon out of the atmosphere at a several $100 cost. And if you look at what's the benefit from reducing that ton of carbon, that's this so-called social cost of carbon, which is very hard to calculate. But the previous administration went through torturous math of almost no discount rate and assumed that agricultural productivity declines despite the 50-year upward trend, that people won't get air conditioning as the planet gets a little warmer. They did all sorts of just craziest. They use a climate scenario that's been widely dismissed as completely implausible, called RCP 8.5, and they stretched it up to $100 for the social cost of a ton of carbon. So if that's the negative impact, should we spend $300 to reduce a cost that maybe is $100? That's a stretch. A more credible estimate maybe is $10 or $20. And then America's only 4% of the global population. So should we spend $300 to save a quarter? That's, clearly that math just doesn't add up. The department will continue to support technologies to maybe find better ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It is a real issue, but we should be credible about it and not just throwing money out of it, because it's expensive. And for a coal plant, for example, to do sequestration, basically you lose a third of the power out of the plant to inject the CO2 underground. So as you and I, when we first connected, we're about common sense. Things that make sense. If we can spend $1 and get $2 of benefit, we'll do that every day and on Sundays too. But we want to critically look at things. Does this make our country better? Is this making our world better or not? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Your approach is very refreshing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time and your public service on this. I want to go into a little bit of the issues around climate change again and the cost per carbon, because I think they are widely debated. A lot of criticism that the costs aren't significant. I have that liability that I actually studied this stuff way back, and I got my master's in Earth and Environmental Science, as we discussed, in 1979 when we called it the greenhouse effect. But it is a little unnerving as I went through my geology years, all through the 80s, that much of what was predicted then, that I was skeptical about, has come true. And it's extreme weather, the droughts specifically in the western United States and southwestern United States were widely predicted back then. And we look at the costs there. So I think when we look at the value of carbon, we have to begin assessing some of these issues. In places in California and Florida, people can't get home insurance. Right? In Florida, from 2023 alone, there was a 90% increase in what people had to spend to get their homes insured. Miami was 322% in 2024. Tampa, 213%. You look in California, and I'm sure my colleague here will go into this even more. Only 31%, by one measure, only 31% of residents still have insurance. They can't get insurance. So this is the result of either these extreme weather events of rain, these rivers in the sky, or it's wildfires. In each case, how do you reconcile, if you begin looking at those costs, the benefit that you get from renewables and clean energy, if eventually we're going to have to address climate change one way or the other? If this is continuing to grow at the level it is, we're going to have to address it somehow.
So, Senator, I always appreciate your thoughtful approach to all of these issues, that interplay between energy and climate change. And so, yeah, many pieces there. And as you and I have talked, the world has been decarbonizing on the way we produce energy for about 200 years. Going from wood to coal to oil to natural gas. Nuclear probably is going to be the biggest growing energy source sometime in the future. Today it's natural gas, but we've moved down that lower carbon intensity ladder. And I think eventually we'll get to probably a carbon neutral energy system, but it's likely generations from now. And so we've tried to accelerate that. You mentioned it. Globally, the world has spent, depends how you count it, somewhere between $3 and $10 trillion on wind, solar, and batteries. And last year is the first year they passed 3% of global primary energy. So it's been a very expensive, it's been an energy resource maybe intended for decarbonization.
We've made great investments in it. We don't argue that.
We made, yeah.
The world's made great investments, and we've seen the price come down dramatically.
We've seen the price per unit of electricity from them come down, but everywhere they've had meaningful penetration, they've led to more expensive electricity.
Well, would you say in Texas, you look at there, so Texas has more than 80%, has 80% more wind and solar than any other state in the country, and yet when you look at it, they have among the very lowest, cost of electricity to a home.
They have the most expensive electricity of the southern states. So it's kind of what Texas does have lower cost electricity, as do many states across the country, but not because of wind and solar. I would say in spite of wind and solar. If the alternative is Florida there, that both of them dominantly run on natural gas, but Florida did not load its natural gas grid with just massive amounts of wind and solar that make the grid turn up and down all the time and drive up prices. So Texas has done, better than New York or New England for sure, But its electricity is affordable not because, but in spite of wind and solar. But let's come back to your comments about insurance. These are very real, very human issues. We do have trouble with insurance markets. I would maintain this is the way markets are regulated, the way they're controlled, and the restrictions of freedom to compete. Because if you look at the losses from extreme weather damages that are paid out by insurance, insured losses from extreme weather damage, it's been on a multi-decade downward trend, not upward trend, but downward trend, over 20% decline over the last 30 years. Deaths from extreme weather have declined over 98%. So extreme weather is not actually exploding and growing, as everyone says. Drought's actually on a downward trend in the U.S. and globally. So
Well, we'll take you down on the Colorado River when you think that we've got 10,000 years of data on the Colorado River, and that's a drought that is not slowing down. I'm out of time, but I will come back for a second round, I promise.
let's go down the Colorado River together, my friend.
Well, absolutely, and I hope when you are coming out back to Colorado at some point, I want to go out to NRail too as well, but we'll get to that in the second round.
We'd love to.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know 5 minutes go quick, so I'm going to jump right into it. First couple of questions may seem off topic, but there's a point. Please humor me here. You're a science guy. Cybersecurity is a top concern for the country. Should we be embracing policies to ensure people's privacy or security, or should we be trying to do both?
Both.
Thank you. We love our freedoms
in America.
Should we be pursuing policy that ensure public safety or protect civil liberties, or should we strive to do both?
Both.
I suggest this because for all the talk that I'm hearing about the need to prioritize affordable, reliable energy, I agree. We also need to be advancing clean energy for the sake of the grid, for the sake of environmental protection, for the sake of public health. We don't have to choose between the two. They're not mutually exclusive. We should be striving to do both. That's my position. Do you agree or disagree?
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Now, a couple of things also to correct the record or to comment on some of the statements you made at the outset, where you made suggestions that some of the funds released at the tail end of the Biden administration were rushed out at the last minute without appropriate due diligence and review. My experience, our office's experience, that it came out at the tail end of the Biden administration because of the due diligence and review that took place. We had been anxious and pushing the administration for years to move on some of these projects. So I just wanted to note that different point of view. Second, your comment about oil and gas resources in America. You seem to have left out the potential and positive contributions of solar and wind and geothermal. You painted a picture of intermittency being a challenge. I point to the experience and quantifiable progress made in California when they integrate battery storage into grid reliability and affordability. So that being said, let me jump back to the key topic of today's hearing, and I'll go back to several of the statements you made during your confirmation hearing. Your confirmation hearing, your statements, Mr. Secretary. You said there was 3 priorities you had. The first was to unleash American energy at home and abroad to restore energy dominance. However, the budget request proposes a 74% reduction in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. It zeroes out wind and solar energy technology offices, and it also zeroes out the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, which was authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Solar was the fastest growing energy source in the world last year. So how does completely eliminating the Solar Energy Technologies Office advance America's leadership?
So solar wasn't close to the fastest growing energy source in the world last year. That's installed capacity, not energy produced. That data, and 1 year is a tricky data thing. Solar is growing fast. I've worked in solar. I'm in favor of solar, and so we've way over invested resources in hoping wind and solar will magically transform into something they're not. But solar will continue to grow for sure. All I've advocated is we should subsidize it.
Cutting you off, but our data suggests otherwise, and we'll certainly follow up with questions for the record and beyond. The second priority you identified in your confirmation hearing was we must lead the world in innovation and technology breakthroughs. I counter that with your budget request, which includes a 14% cut to the Office of Science, a 57% cut to ARPA-E. Again, there seems to be a disconnect between what you say are priorities and your budget requests. It's already been raised that these reductions would also lead to staff reductions in national labs, which we've recognized. You're on the record. These are premier research institutions. When you came to California, you reaffirmed your commitment to the national labs, and you said that they were important to maintain and secure, quote, competitive advantage and security. So unless I got that wrong, how do you expect the United States to lead the world when your budget proposal seeks to decimate our research and development capabilities?
It does hurt me to cut spending in science.
Then don't do it.
Share that passion with you.
Then don't do
Share that
it.
passion with you.
Then don't even propose it. Lastly, and I know my time is nearly up, your third stated priority was to, quote, build things in America again and remove barriers to progress. However, in May, the Department of Energy announced cancellation of 24 projects totaling $3.7 billion in investments under the industrial demonstrations programs. Now, these funds were intended to support unprecedented innovation in cement, glass, chemicals, and iron industries, I think core for the future growth of infrastructure in America. And it's not just because $1 billion of the public and private dollars are in California and the thousands of jobs related, but how does canceling industrial grants that lead to more industrial jobs further the goal of building things in America again?
Because an evaluation showed that the projects at the end were not viable. There's no point in building a bridge to nowhere. If you make a factory, make a product 25% more expensive, but customers won't pay 25%.
Well, the projects
Where's
that are
the
being
win?
cut are more than just viable. I would argue they are critical, and we'll be following up with you and, again, hope for the responses as Senator Heinrich has emphasized. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Daines.
Secretary Wright, it's great to have you back here. Last week, the EPA announced they've started the process to roll back President Biden's anti-energy rules, including MATS and Clean Power Plan 2.0. The Biden administration specifically targeted Colstrip there in Montana with these rules with the express intention of closing it down for good. Mr. Secretary, as you know, this would have been devastating for Montana jobs, devastating for grid reliability and energy production in the region at a time when we need more energy. It is vital we continue to expand energy production, not shut it down or replace it. That means building more projects while ensuring coal plants like Colstrip continue to produce baseload power, reliable, affordable power. My question, Secretary Wright, is as EPA and other agencies work to rescind and rewrite rules, will you weigh in to ensure that grid reliability, energy affordability, and baseload power are top of mind for rules that are affecting power generation?
Absolutely, yes, Senator. I'm passionate about that. In fact, I've testified in Congress multiple times before I got my new job on just that issue, that when regulations pursue a narrow agenda and they don't consider the broader impacts of what they're doing, they can be destructive on our country and on our people. And yeah, I'm very passionate about those topics.
Secretary Wright, thank you. And I will tell you, thank you. We truly have a subject matter expert on energy in yourself and your experience as a scientist, as a leader, and somebody who's not an ideologue, who's very pragmatic in trying to solve these important challenges facing our country as it relates to energy and the constraints we face today. Last week, Senator Hoeven and I, along with our colleagues from Montana and North Dakota delegations, sent you a letter expressing our strong support for DOE's efforts to advance American energy dominance, particularly through the approval of the North Plains Connector Interregional Transmission Project. As you know, the department's GRIP program awarded a $700 million grant to the Montana Department of Commerce for this critical project. When completed, this North Plains Connector would extend a 420-mile high-voltage transmission line capable of carrying up to 525 kilovolts of electricity between eastern Montana and western North Dakota. Right now, Montana exports the majority of its electricity, including from Colstrip, we go west to states like Oregon and Washington, this project would have the potential to diversify Montana's generation assets, unlocking billions in private investment and enhance our nation's energy security by connecting eastern and western electric grids. My question, Secretary Wright, to keep this critical project on track to meet its 2032 operational target, will you commit to supporting advancement of the North Plains Connector GRIP Award to ensure that we can move this forward?
So, Senator, thanks for that impassioned layout of that project. I'm quite familiar with the project. I've met with the developers of the project as well. Of course, it's very, very logical, connecting two separate grids together to allow flows back and forth. It's a very encouraging project. We are committed to following this project review process where a crew of people evaluate, not political, not biased for this or that, just look at the math, look at the numbers, and is this thing viable and beneficial for America? Yes, no, or it's adjustable, it's modifiable. So we haven't finished that on that project yet, but I think you make a strong case for the project, and interconnections between grids is certainly something the United States needs more of.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My last questions and points here regarding the small refinery exemption. Last week, the EPA released their renewable fuel obligations, which will put significant pressure on Montana's small refineries. Unfortunately, the Biden administration never issued small refinery exemptions, and the refineries in Montana suffered. DOE plays an important role in consulting with EPA over small refinery exemptions, and it's important that your voice is heard as EPA makes their decisions. Secretary Wright, I'd ask if your willingness to work with Administrator Zeldin to ensure that our Montana refineries with a small refinery exemption have the resources they need to continue operating.
Yes, indeed, Senator. I said earlier, I think the government involvement in energy has a bad historical track record. You raise another example where, maybe sounded like a reasonable idea became a blunt tool that says thou must do this. There's all different refineries and all different settings and all different access to feedstocks, and it's that rule is not well suited to the problem you've got, and there are ways to address the problem. And as you just said, the last administration chose not to address those problems. But yeah, I think this administration is very practical and wants to look at what trade-off package makes the most sense. So I hear you, and yes, I am engaged and will continue to be engaged with EPA on this dialogue.
Secretary Wright, thank you
for raising it.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wright, welcome. Thank you for being here. Do you support an all-of-the-above approach to tackle growing electricity demand?
I've always said in the past that I don't support all of the above because that's political. I'll support your thing if you support my thing. I think energy is the infrastructure for life and humanity. And to me, energy is about two things. It's about people, humans, and math. And so I support
humans and math. So let me ask you this.
Yes.
Because we are in agreement on geothermal, and I have to thank Senator Murkowski and Senator Coons. Yesterday, we had a great conversation about geothermal, and it is in your fiscal year budget, which is fantastic. You know why it's fantastic? Because we have a lot of geothermal in Nevada, but there's not a lot of geothermal in the rest of the country. It's in a lot of the West, it's in Alaska, not necessarily in the rest of the country. And I believe that all of the above energy approach is necessary for the states to decide what their energy portfolio will be based on their geology, geography, and what they have abundance of. It's not political, but it gives the states that choice. One choice we have in Nevada, along with geothermal, is solar. And so my question for you is, why did, in the fiscal year budget, why did you zero out funds for solar energy and renewable grid integration, which is necessary for many states who are already investing in it, and it's necessary for their energy portfolio?
So the EERE office had a huge reduction in its budget, but it didn't go away. And things like OSED and GRIP got folded into EERE. So these things aren't going away, but there is a dramatic reduction in focus. By far the biggest energy expenditure line.
Why solar?
What?
Why solar?
Just because of the relative over-investment in it. We spent 4 times as much in EERE than in hydrocarbons in the last administration, and one provides 3% of American energy, and one provides 80+% of American
So I don't
energy.
have much time. I'm going to jump to the next one. But oil and gas have had subsidies for decades, and they will continue to have subsidies for decades. So I don't understand the political decisions this administration has made, because I think that's the politics that's happening here. You're favoring one type of energy over another. But let me jump to my next question, because I appreciate you being here. So thank you. On May 23rd, President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act by issuing a waiver for critical minerals. I support it. We need to have critical minerals here. We need to have energy independence. Critical minerals are key for that. But 1 week later, DOE canceled 24 projects, including one in Nevada, that's using innovative solutions to create the country's only all-domestic source of alumina. Now, I assume you are aware that the U.S. is import reliant on alumina, as we produce less than 1/6 of the aluminum we consume. And I'm sure you're also aware that China currently dominates global production, accounting for roughly 60% of the global alumina supply chain. So please explain to me how you're making a decision when you identify critical minerals that are necessary, but that at the same time, you're taking away the essential funding for this country to be independent when it comes to these critical minerals. Why did you cancel those 24 projects, including that one in Nevada?
So thanks for the passion on that. I am pro-solar and pro critical minerals as well. So it really just comes down to the devil's in the details. We review every project. We're going through over 500 of them just to say, is this project at the end of the day going to lead to a positive outcome?
But what legal precedent did you and the department utilize to roll back congressionally approved funds for this enacted program in those 24 programs? They were already enacted. Congress approved them. They were already approved by the last administration. So what legal authority did you have to come back and terminate those?
Oh, all of the contracts, just like in business, all of the contracts have cancellation clauses. And we are in dialogue with every one of those parties. Some of these projects can be fixed to make them more viable. And a lot of these projects will be approved.
So is this one that you will be looking at, that critical mineral for alumina, which we need in this country to be energy independent? Are you willing to look at that project and renew it?
We're willing to look at all of them. We're in dialogues today with 8 of the projects that were preliminarily
So
canceled.
can I get a commitment that you'll look at the Nevada projects as well that you defunded because they are critical mineral mining and extraction and the production that we need to bring back to the state? Will you work with me for those Nevada projects?
Absolutely. We will look at those projects. And absolutely, we want to bring back mining to this country.
Thank you.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome, and thank you for coming to Alaska a couple of weeks ago. The time that you spent there along with Secretary Burgum, Administrator Zeldin, really deeply appreciated. I know you had the opportunity to go up north, get a little fresh air, but really have a chance to engage with so many that are doing amazing things in the energy space. And I really appreciated the comments that you had made at the Sunday roundtable, if you will. You had an observation about energy in Alaska that I thought that was really telling. You noted that there's the big things where we are able to take our energy assets for export to help our friends and allies. That second tier, which is that energy that is going to allow us as Alaskans to have more affordable, accessible energy for our own use. And then a recognition that in certain parts of the state, things just look different. And I think the words that you use was something like, energy or power generation is going to look different in different places, and a recognition that when it comes to some of the smaller scale things, we just have to allow ourselves to have some flexibility and some creativity. So I love the way you had captured that, and I just thank you for that. First question, super easy. Are we going to build an Alaska LNG pipeline?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Innovation. I could really delve into the gas line, but I'm going to move on to some of the other things that relate to the budget. I had an opportunity on that Sunday to visit with 7 or so of the national lab directors. It was great conversation. I really appreciated it. And we talked about some of the contributions that we're seeing out of our national labs. NREL specifically has been working with our cold climate housing center, just some great innovative technologies. So just a direct question to you on the assets, the resources that we're directing to sustain our national labs' ability to really coordinate directly with communities, the ability to offer technical assistance. Are you good with the budget and where you are, and in a recognition that there's so much value to be had from the work of our national labs?
Oh, I love the national labs. They've delivered tremendous value to us throughout their history, and they will in the future as well. I'm actually very open to expanding the lab budget back a little bit from where the current proposal is. I've been voicing that. AI is moving very fast right now. Quantum computing is about to arrive, and fusion energy, a thing I worked on in my youth, is going to come to pass. And this is a time, I think, to lean in as much as we can on these large scientific efforts. And so I am keen, actually, to grow the budget for our national labs in those key areas of AI.
I'll look forward to working with you on that. I think the contributions that we get are so important. And as you say, things are just moving at breakneck speed. So how we keep up with all of this. One of the concerns that I heard, in addition to budget, was also the impact that they have seen with some of the reduction in forces, and just, the people that are doing really extraordinary things that may move on, maybe not the easiest to replace. So know that I am just very, very cognizant of that. I want to ask a question about the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program. As you know, I'm chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. The budget is proposing a significant reduction in the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program. I know this is not just for me, my colleague here from North Dakota, where there's so much potential, I think we recognize, on tribal lands still remaining undeveloped. I guess I'd ask for your thoughts on how we can be doing better. If you don't think it's within the construct of the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee, how is it that we can be more helpful, working in partnership to address some of the exorbitantly high energy prices that we see in our tribal lands?
Thank you for your passion on this issue. I share it, as you know.
Yeah.
So in the history of the tribal thing, I think it's made one loan. That is it.
It's been very
2 or 3 years.
disappointing.
So it's like, hey, we have a whole office and it's got one thing to loan. So I would say that's like a reorg, but it is not a pulling back. I would love to do more projects in tribal areas and remote areas. So I wouldn't read, an office that's not doing anything being folded into something else as a change in commitment or change in interest in that area. In fact, some of the best meetings I had in Alaska were from some of your colleagues up there that are working on energy in remote Alaskan villages. And as you know so well, it's just so different, right? If I critique wind and solar and their impact on the larger scale here. They're competing against natural gas that on a oil barrel equivalent price is $20. $20 a barrel energy cost for pipeline natural gas. In Alaska, they're competing with $10+ diesel, which is $400, 20 times more expensive base energy. If you can put solar or wind or micro hydro on a grid there, you can shrink your diesel costs, extend the time between refueling and shipping. So yes, as you and I have both said so many times, there are different energy answers in different settings at all times. I'm a people in math. And one of the problems I think we've made the least progress on is affordable energy in remote communities.
We got great work to do together, and I look forward to exploring more with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to have a chance to talk with you this morning. When you came up to the office, we discussed the Clean Energy Tax Incentives Law that I wrote in the Finance Committee. As you know, it is technology neutral, no mandates, voluntary incentives. Now, I understand that there was some discussion earlier, I had to be somewhere else, but there was some discussion earlier about renewables in Florida and matters like that. I wanted to run by you something that the CEO for the utility in Florida, actually the utility that covers Mar-a-Lago, said the other day, and get your reaction, because maybe it can help us make some progress here. The CEO said, I'm a CEO who has gas plant holdings. I believe deeply in natural gas. I also believe, because we have such a need for energy now, and we have to deal with AI and many of the concerns that we're talking about. He said, I need electrons from any place on the planet where I can get them. I just need electrons. And that certainly woke everybody up. That kind of drives it home. And people said, well, what about renewables? And he said, I have got to have electrons from the renewable sector. It's urgent. I won't be able to meet the growth and the AI needs. So why can't we just say, we got this economic emergency, and we're going to get the electrons from everywhere? Now, I know about the comments you and others have made about intermittent uses and the like. That's why we've got batteries to help with that. But the more important issue is when a gas executive who says he believes in gas, not somebody who's walking away, he says he believes in gas, but that the problem is so serious today in terms of having energy, he wants to get his electrons from anywhere he can get them. Why can't we get renewables to him?
Well, I've had the same dialogue with the same CEO. He's the biggest renewable developer in the world and runs a big business. But to me, it's about people and it's about math. So we can, nobody's proposing to stop solar power, right? The idea is it's been subsidized for a quarter of a century, and it should compete on its own. And it will. Solar will continue to grow. It'll continue to get built. That's happening right now.
Respectfully, Mr. Secretary, it's getting short shrift in the central climate change law of our time. Until I wrote this law, we had never in 50 years done anything on cap and trade or pricing or anything that anybody, whether they were left or right, had agreed on. And now solar is getting short shrift. We're hearing about it from companies who really feel that it is really being left out at a time when we ought to be saying, this is something, that's why I put technological neutrality as my lodestar. I wanted to make sure that everybody could play, that it'd be voluntary, we'd have incentives and the like, and solar is getting short shrift now. Now, maybe you can do something here as we try to wrap up what we're working on in the reconciliation bill, but I'd really urge you in the strongest possible way to pursue an approach that I'm the author of. And I like the idea that a gas executive is saying, I'm for gas. I am for it. When I was chairman of the committee, my first hearing, because I thought it was relevant to the debate, was on natural gas. But right now, we've got to have renewables, and the best way to get them and satisfy that electron need is that way. Can you help?
What I would like, the bigger the government's involvement's been in energy, and you can look at Germany or Denmark or UK if you want to see people 10 years ahead of us, when the government goes into energy and subsidizes certain kinds of energy, you get a lot more of that. And the net result has been expenditures of money on the subsidies and a less reliable, more expensive system. And that doesn't, nobody wins from that. The only people that win are the people collecting the subsidies, the businessmen who get paid to develop stuff.
My time is going to expire. But the fact is, This is written so that everybody can be part of a marketplace. It doesn't give a preference to somebody. It says technological neutrality. I hope you'll think it over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Bragg.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate you being here. Over the last few years, I believe Congress irresponsibly saddled you, the department, with 71 new programs overseeing hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars, and I think that the situation is fraught with waste, fraud, and abuse. And it left the department, your department now, without a clear direction. So can you talk a little bit about how you're getting the Department of Energy back in a focused direction with regard to your overall mission?
Yeah, I would say the simplest thing is treating it like a business. Yeah, we're not, I've been writing on energy for 20 years. I never infused it with politics. You know, to me, energy is about humans and math, right? Energy is to better people's lives and expand their opportunities of how they can do things. And the way to do that just comes down to what is the lowest system cost to deliver whatever that form of energy is in a reliable, secure way, and reduce the environmental impacts of it, of course, as well. And the track record of markets and that has been quite good, but the government getting in and through our department shoveling out more than $100 billion, most of it rushed between Election Day and inauguration. I mentioned before the numbers on LPO. That's loans. Our department also gives out financial assistance. It's like grants. They give financial assistance to businesses. This is IRA and IIJA money. Those laws passed in 22. In the full year 23, a little over $8 billion of assistance grants were given out in the full year of 2023, $26 billion after Election Day and before inauguration. And so what we have done is created, and maybe frustratingly slow to some people, but we have not been lazy. We have put together a committee of cross-functional people that are going to evaluate every project, you know, on is it technically viable? Is the engineering done? Is it financially viable? At the end of the day, is it going to be a bridge to nowhere, or is it going to be a business where customers are going to pay for the product and it's going to go on? And look, projects that we've evaluated have passed and they're continuing to fund. Projects we've engaged with the other party and we've modified them so it's a positive for the American taxpayers. And a lot of projects have not passed because we're just paying someone to build something more expensive than people are willing to buy today, and nobody wins from that. And I want to restore confidence in our department again. You know, we're professionals that are here to work for the American people, not for our own interests, not for any politically favored, you know, technology here or there. We just want to make the American energy system better. But that means people and process and accountability.
You know, you made, Congress has made key investments in nuclear innovation, and you're an expert in the area. These investments include the Nuclear Fuel Security Act to strengthen our fuel supply chain and the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program to move advanced reactors forward. Can you speak about those plans in the program?
Yeah, there's lots. And in fact, I have a new one today. Maybe we will announce today a new solicitation that we would like to get 3 new small modular reactors, critical, meaning producing power, by July 4 of next year at the Idaho National Lab in our containment facility that can sort of speed up ideas that are ready to go. Let's get them on the ground and test them and prove them. Because, look, the Americans invented the nuclear power industry. We came out and built 100+ plants rapidly. Then we created an NRC and stopped. And we haven't done much for 30 or 40 years. You and I and many others really want to get that nuclear ball rolling again. We're working with companies to get domestic fuel enrichment going in the United States again, another just critical problem. Congress rightfully passed a bill saying we shouldn't be importing Russian uranium. Well, I don't want to import Russian uranium either, but we got to get it from somewhere. We've got to enrich uranium in the United States by American companies and ramp that up. But those are the kind of things we're working on. But there's a bunch of great innovative companies with a lot of private capital behind them. It's private capital that's going to drive this, but we're going to help in every way we can.
Thank you, Mr. And finally, we were together when the president signed his coal executive orders. The last administration was flat out anti-coal every way they could be. They wouldn't support the projects that we needed, even when the ones that resulted in diminished emissions. I mean, they just were against everything. I thought it was short-sighted, left our valuable resource underutilized. What's the department doing in terms of restarting coal research, whether it's novel combustion, carbon capture, coal products made from newly mined coal, as a result of the president signing the executive orders?
So a number of different efforts there. One, I'll just state that the facts. Yeah, coal has been the largest source of global electricity for 100 years. It will be when I die as well. There's a reason coal is the biggest provider of global electricity. But I'll be in your great state on July 11th for the opening of a new coal mine that's combined with rare earth element mining right there. And that, to me, is incredibly exciting. And maybe the biggest thing I've been involved in with coal right now is we need all this extra power everyone's talking about for AI, and we need to win the AI race. The first thing is stop digging the hole. So we've got to stop closing all these coal plants with tons of useful life left in them.
I look forward to being with you on July 11th in Wyoming. Thanks, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Senator.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you again. Thank you. I want to talk about the grid because we all know that there's going to be a tremendous expansion of demand for electricity over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that's going to require significant attention to the grid. And the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership Program was created under the bipartisan infrastructure bill. My concern is that there are a significant number of programs under that have been received approval but are now being reviewed by your office. My first question is, can you assure me that that review is professional and engineering-based and not political? Absolutely.
It is. We're evaluating the engineering, the science, the finance, and just the viability of the projects. It's just a business review. Unfortunately, it wasn't done before when grants were given. But I would say in the GRIP program, there's a lot of very good projects there. But we're just trying to be careful and thoughtful.
One that I'm particularly interested in is the largest grid-scale battery project that's being manufactured in West Virginia, but is scheduled to be located in a small town in Maine that would make a huge difference. And I hope, what's your timeline on this review?
We stood up this process a few weeks ago. Now we're going to get probably, I'm trying to think of a number here, but at least 20 of these a week out and done. But Senator, you raised that again. I'm very interested in that technology as well. And my chief of staff here is here with me, and we'll make sure that in the next few weeks at most, we will get onto that project.
Well, because batteries are part of the solution, not the whole solution, but development of that technology, which was described to this committee something like 2 or 3 years ago, is very promising. So I hope we can move forward on that. Following up on the same area, Grid Deployment Office, again, looking at the demands on the grid, the problem is the budget proposes a 75% cut in the Grid Deployment Office. I don't understand this as a place to cut where this is obviously an increasing demand and pressure on the system.
It is, but I would look at it as more part of a reorganization of the department. That the central thing there is the Office of Electricity and CSER, the cybersecurity thing. They're sort of the two core offices around that. There was a lot of other smaller offices set around, but I would look at the whole complex. So your Office of Electricity is all about the grid. So Grid Deployment Office was, it's got grid in the name, but it's really just a sub-office.
As long as the resources going to strengthening the grid are not diminished. If you're talking about diminishing some other program, that's one thing. But again, one of the things I've noticed just in my career in energy is it used to be that the principal part of your electric bill was the cost of energy. Now, in many places, transmission and distribution is 50% or more, and that's only going to increase unless we start to think about new technologies, what are called GETs, which I'm sure you're familiar with, grid-enhancing technologies, so that we're not simply rebuilding massive facilities that could be obviated by new technologies.
Oh, I agree so much, Senator. You know, like 10 years ago, I'm like, we just got to build more transmission lines. We got to build our infrastructure. It turns out it's so hard to environmentally get approval to build anything. But as you just said,
You can reconductor.
exactly. We can reconductor. We can do dynamic land rating, even with our existing things. There's so much upside in the grid. And there, I think we just got to find some practical solutions and get local regulators to implement these things. But I agree with you. A lot of upside in being smarter about the grid.
My other concern with the budget is ARPA-E. Research is one of the things the federal government can do, particularly basic research that doesn't necessarily lead immediately to commercialization. If it led immediately to commercialization, the private sector would be doing it. This is where the government can fill in a gap in the market. I'm a big supporter of the market, but the market doesn't factor in all of these elements. Why are we cutting ARPA-E by more than half?
That's a great question. And look, I share an interest in basic science, the national labs, nuclear physics. There's a lot of stuff. If the government doesn't do it, no one will do it.
And you, of all people, know that fracking came out of support by the Department of Education. The Department of Energy.
And so, yeah, there's discussions about ARPA-E, what the right thing to do. I know in the previous Trump administration, it was zeroed out entirely. Rest assured, we want to keep ARPA-E. We will keep ARPA-E, and it'll be at a reasonable level. But it had grown fast and wild, and it backed a number of great projects, and maybe a lot of more politically motivated, not technically motivated projects. So it's going to be sizable and meaningful.
Given the demand that we're going to have for energy, it seems to me that research and new technologies are going to be critical to meeting that demand, and I hope that you will maintain the level of support that's required by the demand, if you will.
I agree with your point entirely.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary, good to see you again. Appreciate all your good work. Hope you're enjoying it. Great to have you in the slot. I'm going to start on a shared experience, and it actually relates to something that Senator King just mentioned, and that's the Bakken and the shale. And we actually shared that experience during the period we went through, in the, say, 2000 2010 era where we cracked the code in the Bakken and the shale play. I was in the governor's office and worked on policy to help create a good environment, but so that entrepreneurs like you and the companies you created could get that done. You did. Great. And obviously producing an incredible amount of oil down in the Permian and the ranking members, state of New Mexico, obviously Texas the lead. But in our state, we produced over 5 billion barrels out of the Bakken as a result of that. A lot of energy we don't have to get from foreign sources and adversaries, right?
Yes.
But we need to put essentially now we need to do it again. We need to crack the code again. Now we need to develop the carbon CO2 floods that are going to bring out probably an equal amount or more, given that we're only getting, less than 10% of the oil out of the Bakken shale and the other shale plays. We now need to develop these floods. We've used hot water and other things, but really the CO2 will be much more effective. And we can put a whole nother life on this energy production. Domestic, high quality, highest quality oil, right here at home. Talk to me about how we are going to get that done. How are we going to crack that code again?
Yeah, great question. So there is research, in private industry on this, and there's research at the Department of Energy. And in fact, the guy I picked to lead the fossil energy office, which will be renamed the hydrocarbon office. I really don't like some of the names we've got in the department. But in any case, he's a technology guy. And one of his big focus is just what you said. What's next? He's a young guy from North Dakota, actually.
Oh, you got to be sharp then.
But he's a high-tech guy who wants to look at what technology is 5, 10, 20 years out of the road. And you're right in that the single biggest target of that next generation is enhanced oil recovery out of shales. We can get 10% out with the technologies we've got today. How do we get more? And I think you're right that it's likely that the most viable ways to do it will be some kind of miscible gas that's injected underground. CO2 is certainly a great candidate for that.
There's others.
Right, could be ethane or methane. but 100%. And your research center that you've got in North Dakota with some great technical people there has been leaders in that effort, and I suspect will be growing leaders in that effort. One of the things, if I can ask one thing for the whole Senate, is please help confirm my people. You know, I've got 10 people that have gone through your committee that are sitting there, and I don't have them in the office. I don't have them on the team because of some procedural thing. They've already been vetted. They've already got bipartisan votes among this committee. I would desperately need some more people in the office to help me, including on this one.
Glad you made that pitch. Very important. We're all aware of that. And we all do what we can to help make that happen. I appreciate that. We talked a little bit about critical minerals. We have a very interesting project going on in North Dakota right now with Talon Metals. They're affiliated with Rio Tinto and some other, big mining companies and that kind of thing. But essentially, they're mining nickel ore out of Minnesota, which has very rich ore deposits, northern Minnesota, bringing it over to North Dakota. And they're actually setting up a processing facility at what was the Westmoreland coal mine, which is a coal mine that shut down, reopening the mine, but for critical mineral development. They will process the nickel, and then that will actually go to like Tesla and other places that need the nickel for batteries so that they're not buying that from foreign countries. And then the tailings will be mixed with coal ash to produce building materials. Talk to me how we do more of that. You mentioned the project in Wyoming, but this is a project in North Dakota. Same thing, where we're now going to get critical minerals here at home, and the key is do it in a commercially viable way. That's what we got. This stuff works when we make it commercial. We can do all of it. The question is, can we make it commercially viable, right?
So, Senator, one of the things I'm excited about, this time we are right now in our country's history. Like, we built big things, and we innovated, and we built giant things, and then we became a country where it was easy to stop things and hard to do things. And we just killed the mining industry. It just shrunk to a few existing mines. No one's built a new mine in this country forever. But I think we have a different attitude today in America, that we use these materials, they come out of mines. Shouldn't they come out of our mines? Because not only do we have the materials here, but we can drive innovation to do smarter mining and better mining. But since it's all been out of sight, out of mind overseas, the amount of people that study and think about mining in our country has shrunk so small. And it's up to you and I and everyone in this room to make mining and materials processing sexy again. But I believe we will, because it's now national security. We've seen the downside, national security downside of this. But yes, we need to get going on this stuff. And I think what could happen in the next decade is thrilling.
I love that. We're going to make mining sexy again. That's a great way to put it. And we're looking forward to getting you out to the Energy Environmental Research Center, which you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And again, thanks for all your great work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Cotton.
Secretary, welcome. The demand for lithium has substantially increased in recent years, but the United States is currently only responsible for about 1% of lithium mining and less than 5% of advanced lithium chemical processing capacity globally. That despite lithium being necessary in a wide range of uses to include critically military capabilities. In September of last year, the Department of Energy selected Standard Lithium and Equinor for a $225 million grant to develop the lithium reserves in South Arkansas in the Smackover Formation, where geological survey has found between 15 million and 19 million tons of lithium. I know that this grant was announced before your tenure, and it's under review now. When can Arkansans expect an answer on when the grant will be approved?
I think all the sizable projects will be done this summer. You know, we're in middle of June now. By the end of August, for sure, maybe much sooner than that. And Senator, it is frustrating, I'm sure, for people on the other side. We continue to fund existing projects, but given the track record of what happened when we walked in the door, which is pretty alarming, and the more I've dug into it, the more alarming it is. You probably heard me say before, $90 billion, lent after Election Day and before inauguration, over double the previous 15 years. 25 billion of that in the last 2 days. So in any case, there's a lot of crazy stuff, like a piece of paper. There was a project that got funded for $2.5 million, and then right at the end of the administration, with a sheet that said justification for increase, there was nothing on it. Its funding went from over $2 million, a little over $2 million, to over $200 million. So we want to be careful with the American taxpayer monies, with monies you've allocated, that these projects are responsible, incredible, and thoughtful, and they're going to lead to some good results. You talk about a very exciting one. It's hard to build mines in America. Heck, we can get lithium out of brines, out of boreholes and salt. So very exciting, very keen. We will be on that, and look, let's be talking about it. But we will sort that out this summer.
And we understand that there were a lot of inappropriate actions in the lame duck period, up to, as you say, the very last day. Projects being funded that frankly never should have been funded. But obviously, I think this is one of the critical projects that should be funded. Lithium being so vital for almost every walk in modern life, and now being one of those things that's in dispute with trade negotiations with China. I want to turn to another topic we've discussed in the past, Mr. Secretary, that's security at our national labs. I've introduced legislation with Chairman Lee and some of my other colleagues that would ban foreign scientists from adversarial countries like Russia and China and Iran. You, I know, are conducting a review of security policies at our 17 national labs. When do you expect the review to be completed?
I mean, it is an ongoing process. And every time I see the lab directors, I saw half of them in Alaska. I saw all of them a week ago. I've been to half of the labs now, and I'll get to the other half. So it's a real topic, and it's a balance. It is a balance. Do we want, Chinese nationals in our weapons research or in our critical economic new breakthrough stuff? No, we don't. No, we don't. But we have, of course, projects. I have approved 3 Chinese foreign nationals to work on stuff because they have very unique expertise. It's not sensitive stuff. And if we don't use, a specific person, there were hundreds of potentials. So we've shrunk that down dramatically small because you raise a very real concern. I've stressed it to the lab directors. I think they get it too. So we have like a matrix approach, and we're trying to balance not stopping scientific research, but erring on the side of caution that we have. These are national jewels and national gems, and clearly these countries of concern have clearly shown zero scruples to steal everything we have.
And speaking of caution, have you identified any urgent vulnerabilities that have needed to be patched before your review is complete?
We have.
You know what? Let me stop you. If you'd like to respond to me through other channels, it's fine.
Yeah, let's. I'll just say it's a real issue. It's a real issue.
Are there any Iranian scientists in any of our labs as of right now?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I hope your lab directors hear that. All right. I'll yield back the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, we've now completed round 1. There is interest in doing a round 2. We do need to be out of here by about noon. So what I'm going to propose is that we try to keep our, in the second round, let's try to keep them shorter. In fact, why don't we let each of the Democrats who were, you're finished? Okay. Senator Heinrich, why don't we go to you next and try to, each of us doing it round 2, let's try to keep it to a question or two so we can make sure we're finished by noon, if that's all right. Thank you.
Secretary, in New Mexico, we've got a couple of projects, a geothermal project, and I appreciate your enthusiasm for advanced geothermal, also a grid reliability project. They've both been in the loan program office pipeline for a very long time, and over the course of the last 6 months, the back and forth communication has gone away. And so I would just ask you if you would commit to sort of making sure that your loan program office re-engages with those 2 projects.
Yes, indeed, Senator.
Thank you. I want to ask you a little bit more about this review board process because you described it as a business review, as professional, not political. But your own attorneys briefed my staff yesterday and said that there were political appointees on those review boards. Is that the case or is that not the case?
Oh, it's absolutely the case.
So my understanding is that in previous administrations, these kinds of reviews have been done by career staff. If it's a business review, why do we have political appointees on these review boards?
Oh, it's a hybrid of the 2. I'm pretty confident it was that way before. I don't think the careers would have shoveled out $25 billion in the last 2 days before inauguration. That's not.
For example, in the loan program office, there were no politicals on the review board. The final sign-off comes from a political appointee, but prior to that, the actual review committee did not have politicals. So I'm wondering, if we want to do this in a professional way, why are we putting politicals on these review boards? Why not save that for the final process and let the professionals do their job?
Senator, I'm highly confident the decision-making process now is vastly more professional and vastly less political than it was in the previous administration.
How am I supposed to evaluate that if there weren't politicals on these review boards before, and now we have politicals in the review boards? So why should I believe that to be the case if there's? Why not let the professionals in your department, you have some of the best in the entire world, do their job, and then you can make a political decision?
Because the political appointees that are in it are people I chose. They're business leaders, they're entrepreneurs, they're on the political team we came in, but their job is to evaluate the math, the financial statements, go back and forth with questions. They're playing a business role. And if you look at, and we should have a lunch. We should have a lunch, and you should see how we do things today. And I can show you how things were done before. The change in professionalism and not political professional business evaluation is dramatic.
I'm going to wrap up my questions here, and I look forward to having lunch with you. I do want to point out, I made a mistake earlier. I cited my cost of retail electricity incorrectly. It was not 12 cents a kilowatt hour. It was 10.8. And that is with 35% solar, 15% wind, 15% battery storage, and only 5% coal, 23% gas. So
are those capacity or produced energy numbers?
Those are capacity numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that my utility provided to me when I asked. So that's the retail price for like an individual at their home. So if they're able to do that at 10.8 cents a kilowatt hour, or even 11 or 12, well below the national average, something's not adding up here.
New Mexico's done a good job. Absolutely.
Senator Hickenlooper.
That's so clever to just say New Mexico's done a good job. What senator won't bask in that reflected glory? Let me turn to something that I think Senator King has already talked about a little bit, but I think that I look at energy efficiency. As a former governor and a former mayor, we knew that the cheapest energy we could find was the energy that we didn't have to use. So when you look at whether it's home insulation or all these different ways of trying to find more efficient ways of using the energy we already have and saving it, most of the studies show this 2 to 3 times cheaper than whether you're talking about natural gas or wind or solar or anybody. It's cheaper to get through efficiencies. Some of the energy efficiency experts estimate that at somewhere between 2 and 5 cents per kilowatt hour. I think that we look at the parts of your enterprise that really work on this, and we see their budgets being dramatically cut. We have a.
It's right over your head. I could.
Oh, well, I couldn't see it. But anyway, you look at what this energy efficiency and renewable energy, which of course, since NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, is involved in a bunch of this work and is in my home turf. I can almost on a really clear day, if I get up on the 3rd floor, I can almost see them. That's a dramatic cut. I mean, and you can go even back to pre-Biden levels. That's a dramatic cut. And am I wrong that this is leading to some of the most cost-effective ways of addressing our climate or our energy costs?
So I think you're right, Senator, that energy efficiency is a huge opportunity. And of course, it's pursued in all different ways. Just government expenditure from one department, I don't think is a great proxy of that.
It would have to be a well-run department. So I'm assuming that it's not just from one department. It'd be a department that's now using better systems and doing things more correct, more properly.
We are. We've gone from, 10 computer systems down to 1. And so, yeah, we're doing everything we can to run the department more like a business and refocus it a little bit as well. But I think less expenditure in a department that's got efficiency in its name does not mean a walking away from efficiency. But I think the biggest drivers of efficiencies, like most things, has been market forces, right? People find ways to do efficiencies, as you and I do in our lives and all that. And I've been quite critical and quite concerned about the regulatory example for the DOE. If we just keep regulating, you can only buy the super efficient Cadillac. Well, a lot of people can't afford the Cadillac. So different people evaluate trade-offs differently. So I'm always skeptical of fitting a one-size-fits-all answer onto our whole population.
No, but that's the whole point of doing what the research they're doing is looking at a variety of ways to achieve this goal that pretty much everybody agrees is dramatically less expensive than having to go out and create new energy.
Efforts in energy efficiency at the department and at NREL or whatever aren't going away.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hopefully they'll get added expense. Just one more quick question: the intermittent, and I understand some of the legitimate concerns about intermittent energy, but at a certain point, when you have a secure, you have places where you can get base load, that's secure and effective. That way, if the wind or the solar doesn't have batteries, I mean, ultimately, I think the question is whether you can get solar and wind with batteries to be cost effective with coal or natural gas, which I think you can, but certainly if you look at the direction of funding. But even forgetting that, if your base load is if you've got backup already redundant energy for your base load, so that let's say you only have 30% wind and 25% solar, if you have a cloudy day or you have a windless day, you still have some place you can, turn on natural gas powered plants or whatever. That really takes away a lot of the stridency for, that these intermittent sources of energy are somehow failed.
Well, but it adds to the system costs. Like the biggest demand in PJM, the grid we are all in right here, 65 million people. Peak demand was the night after inauguration. At that time, 44% of electricity came from gas, 22% from coal, 22% from nuclear, 6% from hydro, 4% from oil, 2% from wind, 0% from solar. So you needed if we had zero wind and solar, we needed exactly the same grid. And then we had wind and solar on top. So there's just no way that's ever going to be cheaper.
All right, well, those are the two things we will discuss on our lunch.
Yes.
In terms of both the issues around climate change, because I think there's a lot to discuss there.
Can I come to that lunch, Senator?
If you're polite,
pay.
nice. Oh, he'll pay. All right.
It's getting bigger
okay with
and
you.
bigger.
I look forward to that lunch.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, accelerating the deployment of new nuclear energy is something that I think you agree is critical to the U.S. achieving global energy dominance and meeting our needs, our energy demands, our national security needs, particularly with the rise of artificial intelligence and the emerging AI race that's surrounding that. The Department of Energy has existing authority under the Atomic Energy Act, as you know, to authorize nuclear facilities, including reactors, and appears poised to be able to maximize the use of that authority pursuant to President Trump's recent executive orders. Can you discuss with us the department's authority to authorize nuclear projects, including reactors and fuel cycle facilities? And just describe for us how the department may use that authority to speed up the development and the deployment of new nuclear energy, and whether Congress ought to consider any legislative changes beyond that to help expand that authority.
Yes, Senator, I think we can see from the historical record just what happened to our nuclear industry over the last 20 or 30 years. Almost impossible to permit anything, deathly slow, which means expensive, uncertainty scares capital away. So we are going to try to use all the resources of the department. I mentioned this test reactors. We want in 12 months from now to have reactors that are critical, meaning they are turned on and running in the Idaho National Lab. These are reactors that have been talked about for 15 years. Some of them can be built quickly and ready to go, and we want to use that authority because our fear is the old way it worked. 5 years from now, we'd still be talking about that. Soon we're going to have SMRs. So we're going to use that authority. One of the limits on our authority, we've also put out requests for people to build data centers or energy production on government lands, and we're going to see that happen. Right now, if they're authorized through the DOE, you can run a reactor, but you can't sell electricity from it. So we can run for a test or for what other purposes, but there is a limit there. Of course, together, hopefully we can get the NRC to be focused on safety and environmental protection in a reasonable fashion and not in an obstructionist, way over the top approach it's been in. The Grand Central Station in New York City, a train station, you know, hundreds of thousands of people walk through every day. You could not permit that as a nuclear power plant today because the radiation's too high. So those kind of, and using linear, no threshold, you know, math, if a lot is bad, well, then a very little is still a little bit bad, makes it so that it just has become impractical to build cost competitive nuclear plants. China builds a nuclear plant for a third the cost we do in a fourth time. We want to protect our people. We want safety. We want to do all the right things, but we got to be smarter about how we do that, or nuclear will forever be on the edge of going to happen. We need to make it happen. It's just a great energy source that can help the world.
Yes, it is indeed. And there's something of a difference, I think, between, on the one hand, a slow regulatory process that is advancing the ball and making things safer. And at some point, one might reach the point of diminishing marginal returns with regard to how long it takes. And it sounds like you agree that the system within the NRC isn't necessarily calibrated in order to maximize that.
Yes, and I've got to say, I think a lot of the presidential actions, executive orders that are messaging and changing some regulations and stuff in the One Beautiful Bill are aimed at how do we unleash American energy, how do we get less regulation, more ability to permit stuff and to move ahead with stuff, and spend less money on industrial subsidies that have been unhelpful to our electricity costs, unhelpful to our grid, and it's just dollars we don't have.
Yeah. Okay, that concludes today's hearing. I want to thank my colleagues for being here, for participating. I want to thank you, Secretary Wright, for being here and answering our questions. The deadline for submitting questions for the record will be 6 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, June 19th. Senators also have until 6 p.m. next Wednesday, June 25th, to add statements for the record for today's hearing. Thanks again, Mr. Secretary, for your testimony, and the committee stands adjourned.